I was going through my dead outs yesterday, which I have 3 of. I lost 3 out of my 18 colonies this winter. And after listening to Etienne Tardif's talk on the hive life recordings, it made me realize there's always a reason and there's always something you could have done. Now, I'm not speaking to commercial guys or guys with 50 or 60 colonies. If you're a hobbyist, there's always something you could have done to improve your hive. You have enough time to go through each one and determine what you need to do and give specialized care to them. And so I wish that I had done a lot of things differently last summer. I went through my losses and I realized yesterday that I could pretty much tell when I really looked what happened to both of these 2 out of the 3 dead outs. One of them, I scraped off all the bees on the frames and I pulled off the box and I looked at the bottom board and the entire thing was just full of dead bees and it was booming hive in the fall. So it wasn't because they didn't have enough bees to heat the hive up. I realized it's really because they probably had viruses from the mites. My biggest mistake last summer was I didn't get any of my mating nukes all combined into big hives till like September 3rd or 4th. That's way too late. I needed to be treating my hives for mites in early August. Like I would have tested them first, but I needed to at least be testing by late July or early August when they start to make winter bees. And so since I neglected to do that, since they're all in mating nukes and I know I couldn't really treat them the way I wanted to, I think that's really why I lost that hive. If those bees didn't have viruses from the mites, then I guarantee you they would be filling most of the box right now because they had so many bees in that hive. They had that 20,000 bee kind of cluster that would be huge this time of year. But instead, they're dead. So that leaves me to think one thing. There's plenty of food in there. And so I really think that it's because of the viruses from the mites. And why didn't I treat for mites? Because I didn't get them combined till September. And I didn't get them combined till September because one, I had trouble finding buyers for my queens. And two, I kept, my queen cells weren't high enough quality, so all of them were accepted. A lot of them were torn down, and then the bees made their own queen cells, which delayed the whole entire process. And so I need to really focus on my queen rearing. So I'm also gonna do it, I'm only gonna do 3 rounds of grafting this year instead of 4. And so that will help me get everything combined early. But this year I hope to have all of my hives combined into their winter preparation or winter size by like July 25th or 29th. Because it takes about 10 days to make the cells, and then I want to make sure they have 20 days in the mating nuke to make sure that they lay properly before they are caged, to make sure that they have built up their pheromones sufficiently to be accepted in whatever hive they're put into. So that's 20 days for each round of queens, plus 10 days to get it started. So that's about 70 days. So if I start on March 20th, which typically I've been able to start at the very latest then, I want to start earlier, but I'm not going to push it if I don't see enough drones. It just has to be the right conditions to start grafting. So I'll be careful with that. And then once I do my first graft, if it's on the 20th, and then 70 days after the 20th is the end of July. So if I get everybody combined and everybody tested for mites and treated if they need to by early August, I'm going to lose very few colonies over the winter, assuming that there are plenty of other factors to it as well. But that is the most important thing that I can do to prevent any future losses. I may lose a couple hives, and I'm just going to have to live with that. At 20, if I'm going to have 25 hives and 5 nukes, I'm probably not going to get every single one through. That would be my goal. It really depends on how much time I have to baby each one of them. But regardless, I think it's reasonable to expect to get, about 25, 24 hives through winter, including the nukes. Lose maybe about 5 or 6 out of that 30. If I do that, then I want that 80 to 90% of my hives to be really strong, because some may have some issues and they might die over the winter, and I can't control that. But what I can control is how healthy the bees are through feeding and treating for mites. So if I really focus on the health of my bees for that time in August, in mid-July, after the flow is over. I'm gonna see significantly larger clusters. Like I was going through my hives yesterday and I was not particularly impressed with myself. I had some hives that were, maybe a baseball sized cluster or softball sized cluster, not big. And it basically at that point, they're just like a queen that you can use early in the spring, because if you don't do anything to help them, they're not going to do anything for pretty much the whole season. Maybe they'll build up by like July to do it and have any amount of bees in there, but they won't do anything during the springtime because it just takes them so long to get off the ground. And I have some big hives. I thought I had more than I did when I was peeking in at check sugar the other day. My point being, I think it's unrealistic to expect every hive to survive, but at the same time, if you really focus on your feeding and your treating, the hives that do survive, you should expect them to be at least medium strength, if not large. Like my goal is last year, I'd say my strong colonies had about, I don't know, 3 to 4 frames of brood in mid-April. It was like my first inspection was April 12th. So I would say that's about my goal. So if I'm looking for 3 or 4 frames of brood in mid-April, that would be a big enough cluster. That's what I want. And a lot of these hives that I have right now, I'm about 555. I don't know if I have 5 strong ones. It's hard to tell, but I'd guess I have maybe 3 or 4 strong ones, and then about 7 weak ones, and about 7 medium strength, and about 5 weak ones. And so those aren't great numbers. So if you get your hives through winter, but they're not strong in the spring, what was the point? Like you've spent all that effort, well, or maybe you haven't, and that's why they're small. But if they're small in the spring, you can't do anything. So if you overwinter all your hives, like let's say I have 85% overwintering percentage, you say, oh, that's pretty good. But if 40% of those are weak, then I don't really think it's that good. So like for me, I know I can do a lot better when it comes to managing my bees than I did last summer. I'm hoping having a car will help that. I still haven't bought one. I need to do it. I just haven't really found one that I wanted yet. And so if I'm able to get that car and I have a workable schedule to the point where I can give my bees sufficient time, I think I can have it so all of my bees are at least medium strength next spring. And so I really think that I can do a lot better than I did last summer, and I'm excited to share that all with you. And I think it'll be really interesting what my overwintering percentage and all of that will be. One last thing to give context on what I would consider a weak hive. Like I said, they won't build up for June. They wouldn't make any honey. And what it would take to get them to be bigger. So like last year was the first year I had really relatively strong bees compared to the past seasons. So I was able to get my big hives, balance them out with my weak hives, and that way I had everyone about the same size by late May, early June. So when I split, everybody was right where I wanted them to be. They all had I left behind, I don't know, 5 or frames of brood, something like that. And when I did that, some of the hives still made some honey, which was honestly a little surprising because I took so much away. But it took like maybe 1 to 2 frames of brood, maybe even 3 on some hives, to get them from small, weak colonies to big enough colonies to split and make a little honey. So I really want to focus on, in future years, getting it so I have pretty much no weak hives, and to the point where I have so much brood that I'm like selling it off to other beekeepers. I want to have so much brood in the early spring that I don't even have to worry about equalizing. So I'm going to really focus on the little things during the summer and hopefully improve my overwintering percentage. It kind of gave me hope because I was also listening to some Q&As with Landy Simone from the Hive Life Talks. And she was talking about how she gets 97% of her hives through winter, and she has 100 hives. And so that also gives me hope for, the larger I get, I can still have pretty good results. Or not, well, I won't have that great results, but good results anyway. Check out this video about how I'm going to use my remaining 15 colonies to expand my apiary.